Hey, thank you all for attending the Ortelius Microservice Visionaries event. This event is to celebrate all of our contributors and start conversations in all areas of pipeline management, DevOps, continuous delivery, especially around microservices, which is our topic today. I want to introduce our panelists today. We're going to cover GitOps and why GitOps and where GitOps is going and how Ortelius will be fitting into GitOps in the future. So I am going to leave it to our distinguished panelists to introduce themselves. We have Steve Taylor, Sergio Canales, Christopher Hicks, and Brad McCoy, all coming from different backgrounds, from development, SREs, and solutions architects. And I'm going to let them really talk about their own background. So I'll pass it off to Steve first.
Hi, everybody. Steve Taylor. I am the CEO and CTO of Deploy Hub, one of the core contributors of the Ortelius source code base. Background is mostly configuration management, build management forever. So pretty much seen it all and tried different things so I have a good feel for what works and what doesn't work these days.
Sergio?
Hello there, I'm Sergio Canales. I'm a senior consultant. I work at Red Hat. I day-to-day lead the delivery on customers. We work mainly with container platforms, so cloud for saying some way. So usually I work with a lot of migration and implementation, so I'm happy here to share experience.
Thank you. And Mr. McCoy?
Hi everyone, I'm Brad McCoy. I'm the cloud engineering lead at NOLA. I'm working in Australia at the moment. My background is software engineering, and then I transitioned to DevOps a few years ago. Yeah, big into open source, cloud native, and yeah, happy to be here.
Thank you. And Christopher?
Howdy folks, I'm Christopher Hicks. I am a site reliability engineer at McDonald's Tech Labs. I have been doing site reliability engineering for Uber and Yahoo and a variety of interesting folks, and I've spent a good bit of time doing release engineering, monitoring, and automating all the things. So that's me.
So I just want to give a shout out to all of you. Everybody on this call has made some real contributions to the Ortelius project. Steve Taylor is our fearless leader when it comes to the architecture team. Christopher has supported us from the very beginning. He's one of our first people who actually started showing up to meetings. Sergio just jumped right in when he saw what we were up to and is also responsible for a lot of the artwork you see. And Brad McCoy came to us from Australia, reached out and said, hey, we would like to do some work too if we can figure out the time zones. And he is leading the team that is really starting to look at how Ortelius will work with GitOps. So let's just get started and talk about, I want each of you, we'll go around, we'll start with Christopher, and just tell us in your mind, what is GitOps? Maybe you tell us what it is and what it isn't.
To me, GitOps is the evolution of Heroku. You know, we want to give developers an experience where they don't need to be exposed to how the infrastructure is working. Everybody's comfortable with Git. We can define all of our configuration history in Git and have one source of truth that, you know, is shared by the ops side and developers. And so, you know, I think GitOps provides a very good developer experience if you've got the team to be able to automate the backend.
Brad, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think it's really a paradigm. It's not a specific tool technology. It really drives business value from linking devs to operations even more. So it's defined, at the moment, there's 4 different principles that define it. So they're sort of working on a 5th one at the moment, but your entire system should be described declaratively, whether that's YAML files, and the second principle being the desired state is version. So it doesn't actually have to be Git. You can have container registries. You can have configuration management tools. The third principle is approved changes can be automatically applied to the system. And then the fourth one is the software agents ensure correctiveness and alert. So it's really where continuous delivery is beside continuous operation. So it really, all that stuff we're talking about, how we're shifting everything left, we're shifting security left, it really enables us to do that and work together out of silos in the organization.
Sergio, do you have anything to add from a Red Hat perspective?
For our perspective, is something needed. Is some like by default something like every company should have, because it lets you get advantage about new technologies. So the declarative way of what is put in place with GitOps is the more reliable way to use container platforms. And in the hybrid cloud scenario, is like Chick said, having a single place where all the truth of your application is the way to enable hybrid cloud and having a smooth way to and a consistent way to deploy to every environment. So it's like really fundamental for today capabilities.
Yeah, I think reliability and repeatability is core to this. Steve, so why don't you give us a little bit of the architecture? What does the architecture of GitOps looks like?
Well, I'd like to kind of say what GitOps is not, just to put some context around it. GitOps is not an orchestration tool like a Jenkins. It is really focused on a small part of the whole CI/CD pipeline process. And people are trying to put bolt on other things to it, but that could be difficult in the long run. One of the core pieces of GitOps is the concept of an operator, GitOps operator, like FluxD. Argo has they just introduced one called application sets. And then like Rancher has their fleet. But basically you can think of it as an agent like we used to have for Puppet or Chef for containers now, for clusters. So that's kind of what you can start thinking of it as. And it's, it's the concept of state management is the way I like to think about it. It's the easiest way to wrap your head around it is by looking at what state do I want my cluster to look like.
Yeah, state management, I think it's a really good way to describe it, because there are, even though we are speaking about GitOps in terms of microservices and really defining the state of a cluster and having your YAML file managed in a Git repository, there are discussions about using this same kind of technology to do a lot of things. And I'm looking forward to seeing kind of a CD operator, right? Where you have a declared state for your CD pipeline and it manages it that way. So getting back to just GitOps and really how we're using it today, Christopher, why don't you tell us from an SRE perspective how GitOps is perceived, good, bad, indifferent?
I mean, I feel like the perception is really positive. When I searched for news about GitOps, I really didn't find very many people that were posting negative things about it. The negative stuff that I saw was from the classic IT community that, is still struggling to adopt a lot of these internet technologies. But from an SRE perspective, we're making things more reliable because we have our entire source of truth in Git. And so if somebody messes something up, we can just say, okay, we're going to roll back to a particular point in the Git history, which we know, is good. And then, we can try and figure out whatever the problem was from there. And so, having that, same comfort that you can always fall back to something that previously worked in Git, that power of let's go try new things and see what works, I think is a great way for people to stay agile and keep moving, and it really takes a lot of the different ideas that we've had, continuous integration and continuous delivery, and it buries all of that behind something that the developers are going to have to deal with anyway. Almost everybody's comfortable with Git. It's, become the lingua franca, even if we don't like some aspects of how it works, everybody has to figure out how it works and get used to it. And so once you're in that paradigm, oh, great, we can bolt on the ability for you to deploy to a staging environment without you having to understand any of what's going on in the background. And, that reduces the number of tech support issues that are going to come into the SRE team for, hey, please, can you do this for me? So, we definitely like to see more of this self-service architecture out there, and think it helps us make things more reliable. So within the tech SRE community, I feel like it's got a very positive perception.
Yeah, that creating that, I like to call it a hermetic kind of deployment, and moving away from those imperative scripts into something more declarative really does create that self-service environment. And when I hear people talk about it, I think that you're spot on. That's what's driving the adoption of it. So Brad, in terms of specific benefits that GitOps adds to the deployment process, how is it different from these traditional imperative release approaches? Why does that, what is the difference between this imperative kind of method that we're used to and moving to that declarative approach that Christopher just talked about?
Yeah, but for me, once again, it's a single source of truth, and it allows you to have immutable infrastructure as well. So, in the past, how many times have we seen the disconnect between, development and operations? If we have this single source of truth, then, it makes things like rolling back easier. It makes it easy to audit things as well, and we can really focus on, deploying a lot faster. So if we look at some of the metrics that we see in deployments these days, like, deployment frequency, lead time for change, time to restore, change fail rate, GitOps really enables us to really deploy on demand and be confident that we can release faster. So I think it's all those sort of key metrics. It's bringing down the failure rate, and it's really maturing the pipelines opposed to the imperative way.
The pipeline, I talk sometimes when if I'm on any of these discussion topics around GitOps, I talk a lot about the front end of GitOps, because even though we do have a process that is automated once the YAML file has been checked into the Git repository, it takes care of everything from the back end. But now we have to start thinking about how to get it there. In our standard CD pipeline, we don't like to stop. So Steve, how does GitOps fit into the CI/CD pipeline? Does it fit?
I personally think the jury's out on that one, because if you have some financial institutions that have had the waterfall pipeline and they want their gated pieces, GitOps could actually fit into that world quite well, because you can do your pull request, have somebody review it, have a bunch of approvers on it, and then once it's ready, you can then say go. But if you're looking at a smaller company that doesn't have that type of pipeline and approval process, and you want to just go from point A to production, you have to do a few more steps around the pull request process. and automating something like that out of like a Jenkins pipeline or a Tecton pipeline can be a little tricky. So because you're having to deal with Git and make your pull requests and those pieces automated. It's doable, but it's just a different viewpoint that you have to think about when you're working with it.
Yeah, and when I think about that different viewpoint, I think about the potential number of YAML files that we would have to be managing through the pipeline. Christopher, in a microservices world, does this, because these microservices are independently deployed through the pipeline, does that mean that in this kind of new GitOps world, we'll have lots of YAML files to manage within Git?
There are different ways that you can deal with the explosion of configuration files. Having some sort of templating system and auto generation, I think, can help reduce what the humans are exposed to in terms of you're only having to deal with a relatively small amount of configuration, even if it's generating tons of YAML files behind the scenes. But having all of it in Git, including all of those generated files, means that it's very easy for you to go back and look at the history of a service and trace, when changes were made, and having it in that post-process form, is handy to have it be available. But it's not something that hopefully you've got to manage on a day-to-day basis. And, dealing with the microservice management problem, GitOps isn't the elixir that's going to necessarily solve that. So if you've got that problem other places and, because of the way your organization is working, this might give you more time to solve it because your developers are not working on other things and, they have a nicer time. But one of the great things about all this being in Git is that Git scales really well. So even if you end up with, thousands of files that you've got to deal with, that's not going to blow Git up. It's going to just keep chunking along. And the tools that, are built on top of this are, similarly pretty scalable. So, you're not going to break anything except your brain maybe, but hopefully not even that.
Yeah, that's one thing that when they developed Git that they've really figured out quite elegantly was how to track differences and how to report on them. And that was one of the nice things people like about Git, even though other things can be a major pain.
So Sergio, you work with a lot of different customers. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the use cases you've seen or some of the different configurations you've seen across customers?
Sure. Well, this is like telling about history because GitOps is, well, like everything start from a space, a gap that we are not filling, some requiring some usual problems that you're having in your customers. So at the beginning, when we just doing like Git, CI/CD, at some point you start seeing that in the last mile about the deployment, it wasn't the same that you're been working on the development side. So I think when Git starts like spreading to more areas, to more places, customers, and of course with consultants like me, start to creating like this kind of GitOps before it was GitOps. I think at the beginning, I think the different configurations of what happened in the last years that you have some pitfall trying to working with a single source of truth or trying to have everything from repos. Usually, like if you're working with Jenkins or other tools, at some point you get into some pitfalls because the pattern it wasn't really clear. So I think like if I compare a few years ago, I think today is more clear the way you implement GitOps based on the tooling, based on some experience. So it's a lot of more easier. So for today, like in Red Hat, we are using Argo CD is working like by default. So I think we are like grooming very well what is GitOps and what is the best way to implement it. Even GitOps has been a huge evolve in just a few months. So I think the different configuration is like was hard to have a single source of truth a few years ago because of the paradigms, but today having Agile, having CI/CD, having everything as code, I think we are in better shape implementing GitOps itself in companies. And right now, for what I see into the future, I think it's going to be more like than I don't know, it's going to be like pretty much a service and a structure more well clear to implement. And how I say is, for me, is the best because we have like Kubernetes that won the space in the market just because they work in a declarative way, and we were using imperative toolings in a declarative platform. So today we are seeing more coherency between the tooling around the Kubernetes.
And do you see a difference between, you probably work mainly with large companies, but is there a difference between how small and large companies might implement GitOps? Are there challenges maybe for larger companies?
I'm super happy because I have both. I've been working in a little companies and big companies. So, well, this is similar when agility start to be famous. Like everyone say that it is only for small companies, startups, maybe some unicorns or people with very extreme areas that were working. So it's like similar because it's a new thing. And usually when you are working in a small company, sometimes they don't having something working that well, and taking the decision you don't need to speak with so much people. And at some point too, it's more easy to start again than changing everything or improving whatever they already have. So yeah, I think in small companies you have that freedom, and I think so. I like when I'm in a small teams because I think I feel, and I do it for saying some way, I like to put like more crazy ideas on the table. On the other side, when you're in a big company, you need to take care about what are you going to say. So I think that is I think in every level, like when we talk about innovation and improvement, is about doing different things and trying and failing. So so in big companies you can do it, but usually works in you need to find someone that is going to take the risk. Like usually people expect that someone already do it. So you are going to need to find the bravest people in that big company, do this lab, this kind of weird thing, put it in some way through production, and then with a lot of trouble, more trouble about the size of the company, the approvals and another thing. At the end, you're going to get this like, okay, this is possible. It's not a crazy thing, and it's funny because you can see it in other companies and other places, and it's there. But still, people, okay, but in my company, my rules, my reality, so I need to see it working. So in big companies, usually we use long-term engagement to make this possible, usually related with adoption and transformation. So yeah, to find that crazy people, you need to do this transformational engagement that are pretty much changing culture aspect, behavior in relation between areas. So at the end, the technical work is super short. It's like just a few weeks on my perspective, but the work with the company, with the areas, is like a lot of months. So that's I think is the totally different because right now GitOps like always, it's not like, okay, it's new, but it's totally there. We are using it every day to day. So I think that's the main difference between big companies and small companies.
Well, I think regardless if it's big or small, failing and failing fast and having upper management allow their teams to fail is really what drives that innovation and allows, a shift to something like GitOps to be successful. So yeah, failing and failing fast and being supported at failure is really important. So, and I'm glad.
Sorry, if I can just add to that as well, I think because we're talking about, GitOps as a paradigm, it's not a specific tool or technology. I think that businesses can slowly bring it into their, their ways of working. So, you can, if we talk about those principles I was talking about before, you can slowly start to release that. You don't have to say, well, okay, we have to change absolutely everything for GitOps today. You can slowly roll that into business. You can start declaring your files before you, roll them all out. You can, if you're not using Git or source control, you can start using that, and you can slowly bring that into the business as well. So sometimes it doesn't have to be as scary as some people think of what GitOps actually is.
So
Well,
I'd like to ask one question for Christopher. Do you think GitOps, Brad was saying, the principle is one of the few trends, for lack of a better word, lately that is agreed upon between developers and the operations side? Or do you still think there's like a disconnect? Like in the past, we used to have the developers have one deployment tool and then operations would go buy a different deployment tool. Do you think GitOps is solving that problem?
Yeah, I think it, basically hides the deployment tool from the developers, behind whatever the Git is, so that they're not having to worry about it. So your CI/CD pipeline, it's still there doing whatever the deploy is somewhere, but it's not something that the developers have to see or interact with, so they don't get distressed by it, hopefully.
Got it. Cool.
And Sergio mentioned the evolution of the tooling around GitOps, and I certainly have seen that happening, which takes me to Ortelius. So Brad and Steve, kind of bring us home. Brad, you're leading the team out of Australia for building out our GitOps roadmap. Can you give us a little high-level summary of what that looks like? And maybe, Steve, you can chime in and give us an idea how long it might take to build out an Ortelius interface to GitOps.
Sure. So at the moment, we have a small working group, and we're really going back to basics. We're writing a small white paper on what GitOps is today, what it can be in the future, and we're really during the research stage. We are researching Flux, Flagger, Argo CD. There's so many great operators and tools out there. And then we're also seeing how that's going to fit in with Ortelius as well. So we're really trying out these tools at the moment, and then we'll be building the roadmap out of how we can implement it. And I think it's going to be a big alignment throughout the Ortelius project as well, and we come together and we collaborate on what we think it is. We define what GitOps is to us and how we want to use it. We align, and then we go from there.
And Steve, from your perspective, how big is this project for us and for the team?
Well, if we kind of circle back to what Christopher was saying, where you have when we're talking about the number of files that you have to deal with, the manifest files, and the templating that can be used to help minimize that. Basically, what we're looking at from the Ortelius side is extending that so Ortelius would be driving that process. Ortelius knows the relationships, it knows all the metadata about a microservice, for example. So it's really going to be pulling it all together and, for lack of a better word, kind of like the GitOps editor for your clusters, and not only in one stage of your pipeline, but all the way through as part of that process. And we're what Brad's doing on his side with really looking at the basics and seeing what capabilities these different GitOps operators have and how we're going to fit into that is going to be where we'll have to do a lot of work to see what the strategy is. And hopefully the CNCF GitOps working group is going to come up with some of the standards, because that's one of the things that's lacking right now is some standardization, which makes it a little bit difficult from the Ortelius side. But nothing that we're, within the next 6 months, 6 to 8 months, we should have something out the door that we can start playing with and kind of kick the tires to see if we're on the right track. And hopefully at that time, the operator side will start merging with the Ortelius side on the standardization.
Exciting times ahead.
Yes, I think so. So thank you, gentlemen, for all your insights. We are thankful for your input on this topic. And I want to say, if those of you who are watching out there are interested in getting involved in this project, we do have our own GitOps working group on the Ortelius side that Brad is leading. You can find us at ortelius.io. You can also join the Ortelius Google group. Look for Ortelius OS on the under Google Groups. If you join that, you will get the calendar invites and you will see when our those meetings are. And you can also keep track of what's going on at GitHub under Ortelius. And also, there is, as Steve mentioned, there is a SIG or a GitOps SIG under the CNCF. And if you take a look at cncf.io, you can find information on that as well. So we'd love to have your input. We'd love to have your contribution to the Ortelius project, and in particular around this particular effort. And on that, thank you again. We are out of time, and I hope that everybody has enjoyed the our first Microservice Visionaries Ortelius User Conference. Thank you.
Thanks.